Council Civil Service Commission joint dinner. Welcome to the Civil Service Commission. I think we can start by going around the table here and introducing ourselves for those of you who don't know everyone here. So I'm Lisa Gilmore, Mayor of Santa Clara.
Teresa O'Neill, Council Member.
Can you all speak into the microphones? Thank you. Teresa again.
Teresa O'Neill, Council Member.
Go ahead. Let's go. We'll just go this way.
Nadine Nader, Assistant City Manager.
Brian Doyle, City Attorney.
Julia Hill, Acting Director, Human Resources.
Mario Bosis, Civil Service Commissioner.
John Casey, Civil Service Commissioner.
Carolyn McAllister, Civil Service Commissioner.
Franklin Felizardo, Civil Service Commissioner.
And I'm Pat Kolstad, the world's nicest council member.
Kathy Watt.
We need a lawyer.
Okay, Kathy Watanabe, City of Santa Clara.
Debbie Davis, Council Member.
Okay, thank you all. And I think that before we start into our discussion with the Civil Service Commission, do we have a presentation that Julia would like to make to us? I think we might as well start with that.
Okay.
I know we have limited time, so I want to
Right.
make sure we get to
Right.
that, and then we'll have our
Okay.
discussions.
Sounds good. So the commission activities for the last fiscal year, for 17-18, the commission meets 6 times a year, and last year was no exception. They are responsible for reviewing job specifications, examination weighting, recruitment types, eligible lists, and exam reviews. Last fiscal year, they reviewed 34 job specification revisions and approvals, 18 examination weighting or recruitment type changes, 9 eligible list extensions or abolishments, and 54 examination reviews. The goals for the upcoming fiscal year are to continue with those job specification and exam reviews. They will convene a board of review on August 13th, which is related to a personnel discipline hearing. That's the only board of review we have on calendar for the next fiscal year thus far. And appointing the salary setting commission. So the rest of these slides will be related to that process. So the function of the commission, the salary setting commission is charged with setting compensation rates for the mayor, city councilman, council members, and the city clerk. History of the commission. Measure O was approved by the voters in 2016, revised the city charter section 702 to include a process for considering and setting elected officials' salaries. Yes?
I thought the police chief was going to be part of that too.
Yes. That's specified in an upcoming slide.
Oh,
Staff is recommending to you, we'll come to you with a recommendation to include the chief as well. But it hasn't been established yet. Commissioners must perform the following duties with staff input. Abide by the Brown Act, including remaining fair and impartial, and deliberating with other members of the commission at public meetings only. Fully consider information presented to the commission by staff and/or consultants. Review and consider compensation information. Set the monthly salaries of the mayor, city council members, and city clerk. Staff has recommended to council to include the elected police chief and intends to return to council in August to seek direction in that regard. For the Salary Setting Commission, there will be 5 members appointed by the Civil Service Commission. The initial term will commence January 1st, 2019. 2 members will be appointed for 2-year terms. 3 members will be appointed for 4-year terms. All members are appointed for 4-year terms after that initial term. Prior to March 15th of 2019 and every odd year thereafter, the commission shall establish the salary of the mayor, council members, city clerk, and potentially police chief, effective the next July 1st for the next successive 2 years. So an example for the first salary setting would be those rates would be effective for July 1st, 2019 through June 30th, 2021. Eligibility to be on the Salary Setting Commission. Charter Section 702 requires the commission members to be qualified electors of the city, and just as every other commission member, they're required to show 2 forms of proof of residency. Conflict of interest. To avoid any potential or perceived conflict of interest, criteria will be set to limit those persons that are planning to run for office, are a registered lobbyist, have a relative on the council, volunteer for, or make campaign contributions to a candidate of elective office, and/or any other circumstance that gives rise to a real or perceived conflict. The composition and eligibility requirements will be set at the September Civil Service meeting. So we'll have a report, and they can take action on that. The communication outreach plans. There are 2 forms or different outreach plans planned. One will be to inform the public of the roles and responsibilities of the commission as it is created, and the other will be to promote the vacancies and seek interested residents to serve on the commission. The communications outreach plan will include the following: development of a city webpage and posting news items, social media posts, and the city manager's blog with direct links to the page for more information. Development of a flyer to post at city facilities. Email flyer and information to constituent database. Email flyer and information to the interested list, which is maintained by the city clerk's office. Post an advertisement on government access, channel 15, and issue a press release to local media outlets. So key proposed upcoming dates. The next civil service meeting will be September 17th, and at that point we'll have the announcement of the commission and the call for applicants at the regular meeting. We'll also have the other item, which is setting the eligibility requirements for the positions. After that, we'll have a period for advertising the commission openings and accepting applications. On October 15th, or possibly October 25th or November 19th, depending upon the timing, the commission applicants will be interviewed and appointed by the Civil Service Commission. Those 2 October dates are the dates that we have reserved for potential board of reviews, which are already on calendar. The November date is the last regularly set commission date for this calendar year. And then as of January 1, 2019, the commission term will commence, so they will already be impaneled, sworn in. Prior to March 15th, we're going to have the meeting of the commission to study the salaries, methodologies, basic principles of salary setting, and options. And then no later than March 15th of 2019, that's the last date to set salaries by the commission for the next 2-year period beginning July 1. And if anyone has any questions, we can go from there.
Does the salary setting commission then report back to the Civil Service Commission, or how does it work? They're just completely independent?
I think that they're completely independent, but I'll defer to Brian.
Civil Service oversee that, or who staffs it? So,
What?
curious.
No, I can answer that for you. Julia's gone. I was in the charter review for 2016. I was the proponent also for the term limits that we did. And also when this came up, I brought it to the attention of the other members that the Civil Service Commission, since it's mostly a government, city employees, could be the ones that will determine pick the members to serve in the commission and also oversee when the budget is reviewed. So this is up to you. You are the ones that can tweak the process that we have. One of the things that we have right now that really concerned me that the voters didn't vote for was for the police chief, and I know staff recommended that, and I feel very uncomfortable having the police chief, because they're a completely different salaries. It's something similar to what our city manager or our city attorney does, and their salaries, I understand, maybe Debbie can address to this better than I can, is regarding their, the captains and so on, is whatever the unions and the city manager does. Yeah, right. So it's a touchy thing there. I really don't know if we want to get involved with having the police chiefs included in that. So I just want to bring that to your attention for you guys to debate.
What did Measure O actually say?
So I have the charter section in front of me. It's 702. So the only role that the Civil Service Commission has in the setting of the salary is simply selecting who's on the salary setting commission. So the Civil Service Commission doesn't have any role whatsoever in the actual setting of the salary.
Okay.
And so it would, according to the way the charter is written, the salary setting commission simply sets the salary So I would assume that it would just be a report back to
Then report to the council.
the council, and then I don't think the council would have any discretion to change that. They would just simply put that in the,
Accepted.
in the, I think the only action the council would do would be putting it into the salary schedule.
So, Brian, I thought that we set this up so that we could get this out of our hands, that we don't want to touch this anymore. So, who would staff this? So if they're going to set the commission, then who's going to staff this so that keeps it out of our hands? I mean, how do we do that?
You are correct.
That's the question for the city
The
manager.
council took two actions. The first was to remove the city manager from supporting the salary setting for the elected police chief. That was an appropriate governance action, as well as removing the city council, just given the alignment and wanting to put in place proper governance. When we looked at our records, there was discussion at the last couple of hearings regarding the elected police chief salary, that we move this item to this commission and have it be studied, and staff would support that and do the research and report to the commission our findings. But I would not be making a recommendation nor involved in the decision-making. The commission would recommend the salary setting, but staff would definitely provide that support and conduct research for the commission.
And there's one element of the charter section that really hasn't been brought up here. The salary setting commission would be limited to a 10% increase every 2 years. So in other words, there's a cap of 10%. So it's not like something wild could happen at the salary setting commission. It's basically 5% per year.
Okay.
Or really 10% every 2 years.
Is that just regular CPI or?
Well, no, that's the limit. So the range is between 0 and 10.
Okay.
So it's really a pretty limited determination that they'll make. And so I'm not sure how the manager wants to staff the, who would provide the input. I would imagine it would be some kind of process by, establishing the salary setting commission, asking them what things they want to look at within this range, and then just getting that information to them and let them make the determination of what factors they should consider in terms of what to do within that range. Now, that 10% figure is limited by the charter only to the mayor and council members. In other words, if you wanted the clerk or the police chief to be subject to some kind of limitation, then you'd have to put that in the ordinance where you sent that to the salary setting commission. But at least as far as the council members and the mayor is concerned, you'd simply have to accept what the salary setting commission set as the amount.
Okay, I'm good with that, because I think what happened with the clerk and the police chief, it was like the Wild Wild West with raises, and it got a little out of control, and we didn't have, and it kind of fell back on us as a council members, and I don't think that was fair, because they were elected officials. So I'm all for this commission doing this and setting this up, because like you gave them the criteria of not having any nepotism or anything engaged in that. So I think that this would be more fair and impartial coming from this commission, and then being overseen by a staff person that makes sure that the criteria is followed for whatever that person does, or throughout the year that they're here, or job interviews, whatever the criteria is for the raise, to the cap. So I'm all for this. I'm hoping that this is gonna go smoothly, but just finding how many people? You guys?
Five.
Five people in the city of Santa Clara.
That's really one of my concerns is, how about if you just put one of your signs in front of your house? Are you going to be not eligible to be in the commission? So that's the things that we're going to have to tweak out and kind of get the feeling when you're discussing things with the citizens that are coming up forward to try to get appointed to that. But I agree with a lot of the stuff that you said there, and I think the part that kind of looks wishy-washy is having that's what we were trying to avoid, having the council itself and the mayor approve their own wage, so that doesn't make any sense. That's why when I brought that up, I brought it up, it just didn't, the writing wasn't just done right, but I said, no, the commissioner, the Civil Service Commission, should be the ones that finally approve after the other, the commission does recommendations. And I hope they also will talk to the city, get the input from the city manager, because she can say, hey, this is what we can afford or not. But since your stipends is so little that is compared to the rest of our budget, I don't see that much
Yeah,
problems
we
with
make,
it.
yeah,
Yeah.
like $4.20 an hour.
Yeah, well,
If that, yeah.
yeah.
Some people say we're overpaid.
That's
but yeah.
what I was gonna say. And so if I was you, I wouldn't open the door there just in case anybody else
Depends
is
on
hearing.
what side of the camp you're
Yeah,
on.
good.
But can I go back to my original question on Measure O? Does Measure O say that it's a process for considering and setting elected official salaries, so it's all elected officials? That's, I've just needed to, it doesn't say that.
It was just intended for the mayor and council members.
The Measure O only applies to the mayor and city council.
And the city council, okay. But we're gonna look at this committee for setting other elected officials.
Well, you already designated that the city clerks, you set the city
Tied
clerk's
to the
salary
city
at 30,
council.
at the same as a council member.
Right.
And then you directed that the city, any changes to the city clerk's compensation should be by the salary setting commission and not by the council.
Yes.
Yeah, and I think it's great, and I think the job that the Civil Service Commission has is to select, you know, these five members. And there's so many people that want to serve our city. I think you're probably going to be pleasantly surprised in the number of applicants that you get for this committee. I think there'll be quite a lot, and you know, it's a matter of setting your own criteria of
Betting.
type of individuals. No, it's great. Yeah. So I think that it's just, we want to make sure we do a good job in the city of pushing it out so that there's, you know, another 5 more opportunities to serve the city. And it's you know, sort of limited service, although you're still termed for many years.
Yeah.
You're only going to be meeting, you know, 6 months or so out of every other year, something like that. So, is this something you're looking forward to as part of your job?
John, you're easy.
I was spending the city's money.
Well, money's money.
Everybody likes money.
Yes, please, just jump in, everyone. It's such a small commission here. Jump in, yes.
So other than the 10% every 2-year maximum, is there guidance on where we want to be as a city in terms of salary and you know, compared to our comparables in either in the area or similar size, or is it just strictly the 10%?
If you want, I can address that, because that's what your questions, which we talked earlier. It's that way we discussed. We spent 2 days talking about that and seeing what comparable to the other cities with the population and so on, what their pay was, and that's when we brought it to the voters. We came up with the figure that they right now are making, and we're still below what they should be making, but that's why we set also a limit at 10%. So.
Okay, I've got a concern. Sometimes I differ with the council, but I wouldn't want the job. The hours spent, the grief, and I was a little surprised when I looked and saw what you make. It isn't worth it. I mean, you're clearly not doing it for
We
the
just
money.
got a raise.
It's about service.
Yeah, exactly.
It's about service.
It's about service.
It's not about the Benjamins, it's about service. So, yeah.
And the one thing, I know that 10% states, I don't know that it's actually a requirement, but the state recommends it. But it seemed to me it was a little parsimonious, especially given what the council's making now. Just a thought, and to Franklin's point about the other benefits in the compensation package, again, that's not covered in state law, but it would seem to me that might be a way to ease some of the burden. Just a thought.
Well, I think there's going to be a limitation because of the charter change and the details in the charter change. that we have to comply with. So I don't know how much, if any, flexibility on, certainly not on salary. I mean, the cap is there, and doesn't mean you have to go to the cap either. So, you know, it just depends on what's happening, I guess, at the time. In terms of other benefits, I'm not even sure. I don't know about that. I wouldn't even try to imagine, you know, if there's any leeway on anything. So, yeah, I know the charter is just pretty strict on the numbers and the salaries. Yeah, I don't think, unless you go to full-time council members and mayor, like some surrounding cities, I mean, that's different. This is supposed to be a
Part-time job?
part-time. It's a part-time job. It's a part-time, you know, elected
It's
job.
getting full-time work.
It's a full-time, part-time job.
It's a full-time, part-time job.
Well, see, you're doing a great job. You're giving influence to all these other folks who are part-time. They should work as hard as you do.
Yeah.
Right.
We have a goal to show part-time city council can get a lot done.
Yes.
We're lean and mean.
We are lean.
Yeah.
But we thank you for taking this on, because it is a big responsibility to appoint that many members at one time on a new committee and commission, and there's going to be a lot of questions and that. So whatever our staff can do to help you, because we can't help you in that respect.
We don't really want to help you.
We're not supposed to help.
It's a measure. You got strapped with a measure is what you got.
So we appreciate you doing that. So putting that aside, are there other issues that you'd like to talk about us and what's going on with your commission and how the city council might be able to help you in your work on the commission? And I'm looking to Julia, but I'm looking to you also. That's right. We'd like to hear from all of you, if that's okay.
Thank you. Last meeting, we had a very interesting discussion in public about helping someone or not helping someone. Helping's the wrong word. Would we address an issue or not? What I kind of would have liked was a little bit clearer direction from the city. And I know we don't want to involve names, but I left the meeting without a clear understanding if the person was classified or unclassified. And I left the meeting with a serious question about, well, you tell me I can't vote on this, what am I doing even discussing it? It would have been helpful to have a little clearer direction. I think that ultimately the commission made the right choice, even though I didn't vote for it. But it would have been nice to have a little more concrete.
I have a question. Julia, even though you're a legal person also, do you give them legal advice as far as an issue? No.
No, we have a member of Brian's staff, Diana Fazeli.
Oh,
She
Diana, okay.
she is
Diana's
at
staff,
every meeting.
Okay.
And so she provides the commission with legal advice.
Okay.
And we have in our office, we have an ethical wall between,
Chinese wall?
we don't use that word.
Okay.
It's basically a question of due process, because these are semi-judicial type proceedings. So Diana and Sue can't talk to each other. So Sue advises the commission, and Diana advises the commission, and Sue Julia is
I'm just staff.
Julia is staff. She provides the staff information, reports, so forth and so on. But when it's a situation where there's an adversary proceeding, where there's a employee who's taking a position against the city, then Sue will represent the city's position. And because the board is really in that regard, it's an independent body, and so they have to have a separate legal counsel just to advise the board. So that's just how we arrange this. So I realized that there was a proceeding that came before the board the last time, and it was really a question of whether the board even had jurisdiction to even hear the person's claim. And I wasn't there, so I don't know how it was explained to you. And if it wasn't explained well, then I can just pass that on to my staff, and maybe they can figure out a way to do that.
Brian, just to make a quick statement here. I think that the Assistant City Attorney, she made a great presentation, and she was very clear on what we needed to know. Also is, we have to go by the law, by what this charter says. If it says an unclassified employee cannot have any grievances heard in front of the Civil Service Commission, that's what we have to go by, no matter what other feelings that we may have. So that's what the three members I voted for denying that, that's what we did. We went by that. But at the same time, I wanted to have the attorney, because I felt that we were gonna probably be in a litigation with, probably Brian's more familiar with this, but I wanted to see what he was gonna put out there for our city to try to fight back with. And actually, the attorney that came in front of us wasn't too prepared at all. So we felt kind of confidence that Brian should be able to handle this in case he decides to bring this matter to court, to litigation. But
So, sounds to me like, almost like a jury, you needed clear instructions before you made.
Right. And
before you knew what you were voting on and making
Right.
your decisions. I'm just.
And that's what we can always ask. And a matter of fact, I try to clarify that by calling the office early and says, no, we're going to be there. I'm going to make sure that you understand this. And so I checked on a couple of our city charters to make sure that we were on track with that, and things worked out just fine.
Check the minutes. I actually asked the city attorney while we were in session, what are our choices here? Quite frankly, as the Commission Chair pointed out, there was a legal requirement. However, there's that part of me that says, this ain't right, and I struggled with that. Yes, the city attorney, you're absolutely right, the deputy city attorney did say, you can agree to rehear it. We hadn't heard the first thing, so there's obviously no rehearing, or you can refuse. It was just unclear to me, and I would have, again, liked a little clearer direction.
I'd like to do a little bit of research into the matter and just make sure that the processes that we upheld, as well as just hearing how we can serve the commission better in the future, that we have an opportunity to work internally so that these type of issues don't come up. I am aware of one matter that may have inadvertently almost made its way to the commission. We did do some internal review, and we did find that it was not within the jurisdiction of the commission. It was for an unclassified position. I don't know if that's the matter, but I do want an opportunity to just look into it and make sure that we are providing the appropriate support, both for our staff who has items and depends on the commission to make findings, but also for the commission. So allow for us to do a little bit of work on that end.
Always, if you're not certain of something, ask. Don't assume anything.
Right.
Go ahead and ask. That's what we have our city employees here.
I'd like to make a suggestion that, especially since we get new members, in between terms and things like that, that when we get a new member, maybe we could meet 15 minutes prior to our commission meeting and just have the city reiterate the actual responsibilities and power of the Civil Service Commission, because they're very strict and they're very limited. And when you put things in that perspective, does it fall in that category? It really eliminates a lot of the other issues that, like the one last week that came up, by my mind, it didn't qualify because it didn't fit the limits that we had.
One item that we can consider is just looking at the report template. I know the assistant city manager and myself were able to work closely on a matter that was prepared for the commission over the last couple weeks, which was this report. But we could look at the format so that we begin with the action that we're requesting of the commission, the authority that the commission has, so that when you read the first part of the template, those answers are very clear and evident for the public, the employee, and the commission, and then get into the substance of the matter. So we can certainly work with the commission on a report template that better serves those needs.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Save a lot of time.
I think that would help. I think it would really help.
And I want to reiterate what the city manager had stated about potentially, I guess, diverting an agenda item from getting on the agenda when we didn't have jurisdiction over. And I think that's what we struggled with, was we didn't have jurisdiction over it anyway, so why was it on our agenda? It just
Right.
created
It's a
chaos.
little bit better
I think,
vetting.
you know, and we could have just moved on with our agenda as
Franklin?
normal.
Okay, and we don't want to beat this one up because it got an hour at our last
Right.
meeting. That was not clear to me at all. As a matter of fact, I'm sorry, but if something shows up on the agenda, my perception is the Civil Service Commission is supposed to do something
with it.
Right.
What that something is would be based on the facts, of course. But if they took the time to waste all that paper, we're supposed to do something with it. And the attorney for the former employee made that point abundantly clear. The reason I'm here talking to you tonight is because you can fix this. And so I think what you're talking about, city manager, will help a lot.
And I agree, and we too have had internal conversations within my office about improved staff training so that they're able to identify the matters that do need to come before the commission, as well as the matters that we personally have had to stop. And so it is something that I'm very much aware of. We did have a conversation with the HR director upon her return from vacation. And so it is definitely on my radar. We've had internal conversations. We've actually caught a few that didn't go your way. But we do need the staff training in-house to strengthen this.
Thank you.
The whole thing is, the attorney on the other side made a mistake. The mistake was, we should have heard if the employee was unclassified or classified. That should have been the hearing part at all. Nothing else about money or reposition. That should have been the only part. Classified, unclassified. That should have been the hearing on it, not going through this whole thing like doing the complete litigation that he was doing. That wasn't it. And it would have been simple and quick. Because looking at all the evidence that they have, still unclassified. He was offered the time. He says, you want to be classified or you want to bump back? What do you want to do? He said not to do anything. So it was simple. It was a simple decision for us. You're an unclassified employee. We cannot hear it. Sorry. You're done.
Well, thank you for bringing that to our attention. We hear you loud and clear. I think the city attorney, city manager's office.
We are already aware of the training need and as well as the improved support.
Yeah.
But it's
Filtering
important
the
that,
issues and bringing the right issues to the commission.
Yeah. I have a,
for bringing them forward, yes.
I have a question. Do you have the ability to continue an item if you can't reach a resolution and just bring it back to another time to get clarification on an item? You do have that ability?
We've
Yeah,
not,
okay,
though.
okay, that's good, okay.
No, we've not.
Okay.
No, we have that right.
Okay.
Sure.
And you're meeting every other month?
Yes.
Yes.
What are your meeting schedules like? Are they long? Are they
No,
short?
generally, they're very
Generally
short.
Oh, that would be you. Okay.
No, we had, thanks to Mario, we had one meeting last year that was almost 2 hours, and that was lengthy.
That's lengthy for you.
It was lengthy.
Okay. Interesting. All right. Other comments about what we can do to help? It sounds like
You know,
the major things
I
here.
don't want to just brood on it, but, you know, it was a little frustrating last week, but it was really interesting, too. And I learned a number of things from the city that I hadn't learned before. I didn't realize you had a bump back from unclassified to classified. That was interesting to me. I'm retired civil service, but we didn't have that, you know.
And the property right thing, I actually had to go look that up. I said, no, that can't be right.
Yeah, it's just interesting, learning new things.
Good.
Appreciate it.
Challenges.
Yeah, it is.
And now they have to find 5 people.
Yeah.
You'll see what we go through when we try to pick commissioners, right?
Absolutely, challenge.
Yes.
The whole thing was, if you would have seen this, look at the complete picture. One of the things that the commissioners afterwards, one of the things discussed was, this employee should have never given the time off to do this, especially when he was employed in the elected for Silicon Valley Power, and he wanted to become a lawyer. Nothing to pertain to this to what his job was. And not only that, we paid for doing some semesters in fact. Yeah. So that should never would have happened. If I would have been sitting there, I would have said, no, there's no way you're going to take 2 years or 3 years off for something that it's not going to pertain to our city, to your job description, to learn how to be an attorney. It doesn't make any sense.
You get interesting cases, don't you?
Join the council.
He tried.
Yeah, okay.
So it sounds like the moral of the story is if you pay for somebody to go to law school, don't be surprised if they sue you.
Threat from the
Franklin?
attorney. That was the threat from the attorney. That was exactly his threat.
You read his letter that I got a little dirty look, I think, from members of staff was that I said, you don't come here threatening us if we don't hear this, that you're gonna sue us. That it's not the proper way to start this.
All he said was he would have to advise his client to consider litigation.
In plain language, I'm gonna sue you if you don't do this.
Franklin?
Madam Mayor
Yes.
and council members, to your question, what else?
Yes.
And hopefully to possibly end on a positive note, your staff is real attentive, particularly to the commission and to getting us
Always.
our
Yes.
packets on time and ready and keeping us, appraised of any changes or things like that. So I, being the newest, really do appreciate them being so attentive. It's the Santa Clara way that I'm used to, as I stated in my interview. And so I really do appreciate that. So there's nothing else from that perspective that needs attention from my opinion. We've discussed something that I think will be addressed by the city manager, and I'm confident that the next 4 years of my term will be just as pleasant as the last.
We appreciate especially the feedback about the staff, because they do have a tough job. And you have a tough job on the commission. The Civil Service Commission is not an easy commission. So thank you for stepping forward to even volunteer your service on the commission, because it's not an easy assignment in so many ways. And so we do appreciate it. And that's the reason for these dinners, so that we can hear from you and try to correct any issues or help you and support you so that you can do your job the best that you can with our support. So thank you so much. I'm going to ask, Teresa, do you have any comments, the council members?
Julia.
Are you happy? Okay. Debbie?
No, I think that you guys, I'm grateful for the 5 commission that you're gonna have. Oh, sorry. I keep forgetting, because this is like automatic up there. I'm grateful that you're gonna have, time to do this 5-person look for this commission. You have a measure that you have to fulfill, and it's not gonna be easy, but the mayor's right. I mean, you might see how many people actually wanna serve the city in some capacity, and this might be right up their alley to, for salary setting. This was something that we wanted out of our hands, and the residents voted, like 85% on this ballot measure. So this is a good thing. This is a really good thing. And anytime we can delegate work out, we're happy. But thank you for your service.
Oh, it's enjoyable. Thank you.
Kathy?
Like I said before, I mean, I think it's always great to be able to have an opportunity to grow and learn, and no matter how young or old you are, and so I think this is great, but I think it also makes it exciting, for future commissions. We know you're not going to be here forever, unfortunately, but I think it's a nice selling point, if you may, when getting people to want to apply, that these are the kinds of roles that we take on, and it's not just sitting behind a desk and making decisions. I mean, we really have to think about this and also work with other people and getting input and making decisions. And I think that's really important, to keep our commissions lively and getting good people involved. So thank you also for your service.
Pat, nothing? Franklin, do you have any parting comments besides the nice ones you made?
No,
Carolyn?
Thanks for dinner.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Absolutely.
I have some parting. So I do want to take the opportunity to thank the Civil Service Commission. The city of Santa Clara is known as a competitive employer, and its ability to retain staff is something that in a competitive market like what we have here in the Silicon Valley is very important. You play a critical role in protecting the city's interests as well as in protecting employee fairness and interests as well. And so you've balanced it well. You've surfaced some real issues for us to address. but the role that you play is significant for the city in protecting our interests as well as those of employees. So thank you for your service.
Thank you.
Thank you. And Mario, parting comments?
Keep it on time.
Okay, is that it? Thank you, and thank you, Julia, so much for everything. We appreciate it.
5 minutes late.
Brian, Westchester. Westchester.